Hey there, welcome back to Outbuilding. I'm excited to share with you a new set of projects that I'm calling the Workshop Series, and it's a playlist. It's going to be the build out of a large modular island workstation for doing cabinet work in the workshop up above in the upper level. I've been using this table saw that's mobile and these other pieces, and it's worked well for many, many years in different circumstances, but I really need a much more stable, flat, and predictable area to do precise cabinet work. So I'm going to start by building some sawhorses. The sawhorse I have here is 30 years old. This was something I built in my then girlfriend's garage because I didn't have a place to run a shop, and I bought a table saw, so she let me use that, which was very nice. I then married her, and we've been married for 30 years, and it's been great. The sawhorse is getting pretty tired. So I'm going to rebuild the sawhorses that are going to be modules in that greater workstation that I'll put together over the next series of these videos. So if you're interested in that, if you want to be inspired about workshops, if you just want to get some ideas or be entertained by watching, this would be a good video for you. All right, so step one of these was to just cut out the dimensional lumber. So these are just 2x4s and 2x8s, and these are the 4 legs. The feet for the previous one worked really well, so I'm just gonna do the same thing. You just cut a little bevel on the edge to clean it up, cut the sides down to 3, so that they're 3 inches wide. These were 2x4s, and then you just use a piece of masonite. Masonite has a hard side and a soft side, and so I'm gonna put the soft side down and glue it on. Put the hard side up, and that just gives these feet a little bit of rise over the span in the middle, so they don't high center on something. And the old one was always really stable, so I'll just glue these up, set them aside, and then the legs are done, and I'll start working on the base or the trunk of it. All right, I'm kind of excited about this. I've got a new saw, new to me. It's a track saw, and I haven't used a track saw before, but the whole idea is that I want to be able to break down large sheets. Like this is a 5x5 sheet of Baltic birch that is really nice wood, and I don't want to waste any of it. And so I'm going to use this track saw, and I've got these red parallel guides help me put kind of a fence against the track so that the track is registered against the side of the board. And I got this handy little saw that will cut, and I'll run a pass here. And it's kind of interesting because this track is not as long as the board, but because this thing's super accurate, I can run halfway, stop, lift it up, move my fence down, and then resume my cut. So this is my very first cut with this, but this is kind of why I want to build sawhorses, but also why I want to redo my island, because I'm going to do a lot of my breakdown of sheets with this track saw rather than trying to muscle them around on the table saw. So right now, because I don't have an island, I've got this jerry-rigged, and I can show you I've got some tripods that are kind of holding things up, but I kind of have to, it's a cart and horse problem. I need to build the horse so that I can have a cart. So here we go. Right on, looks good. This is going to be much easier when I've got more space to work on a bigger deck, but first cut worked well, and then I can just reset and do the next cut right by pulling the board across, which is really nice. All right, so I got all the wood cut out. The legs are glued up and ready to go, so those I can set aside. They'll just need to be sanded and they're done. This whole design, it really has been instructive. There's a couple things that I liked about it that I'm going to reuse. These side uprights have a little notch cut out in them, and that notch accepts this little tray or drawer or whatever you want to call it. And that tray actually holds the feet when they're taken off, which in the old one was nice. You could hang it up on the wall. The new one, I'm going to stash the feet in there when they need to be hung up on a wall, but I'm going to do something different with the top. There's a missing top on this old Sawhorse that got sawed up or broken. I forget what actually happened to it many years ago, but that used to allow it to slide up and down and adjust the height of the Sawhorse, which was really pretty useful. And it used this masonite track to kind of guide that as a little rail going up and down. And it had a slot cut in the upper piece that was sort of U-shaped. And then there's a bolt that goes through here. And I'm going to sort of reverse those rolls. I'm going to cut the slot in my side rail here. And then I'm going to put just a fixed hole in the outer piece, which is the top that's going to go up and down with a little wing nut to kind of tighten it up. So I'm going to stick with that design. That worked really well. But for now, I just need to cut these notches to accept this little tray side. And that creates a lot of real sturdy strength. This joint down here isn't as strong, but that one's really strong with that joint in there. All right, so there's a bunch of ways I could cut these side notches, but because I've got 4 pieces, I can make kind of a big brick, and it's pretty easy to slide across my miter. It'd be way easier with a sled, which is something I'd like to work on in the future. But anyway, I'm just going to set the blade to this height and just run passes across and carve out that notch. And I've got marks on my boards, and I'll just do the whole stack at the same time. So that worked pretty well, but I got a little bit of tear out in the back here, which is not too bad. I can glue a little bit of that, but the easy way to remedy that on the other side is I'll just put a piece of backing wood here, just a piece of scrap that'll salvage that. I'm sure the interior pieces didn't have any tear out, and so I just need to put a little bit for just the first and last cut, and the interior cuts don't matter because it all gets cut out. There's a bunch of ways to do this, but that was easy enough to set up and just plow through. Okay, so the last thing to do with this is just to clean up these little notches with some sandpaper. And I'll show you a little trick that I learned that actually saves a bunch of money. This is called a longboard, and you use it when you're fairing. I use this for fairing a boat hull, and it's a piece of semi-flexible plexiglass, and you get both hands into it, and you sand and fair curved surfaces. And it comes, there's available this adhesive-backed sandpaper, and it comes in a bunch of different grits. And I found that I don't know, this was super inexpensive. I don't know, it was $25 or something like that for a huge roll of this on Amazon. It comes in a bunch of different grits. This is 80. And I find that if I just take that and just take a piece of scrap wood and cut it to this, I think it's always 2 3/4 inches wide. So you just cut a piece a little bit smaller than that. Stick it on a piece of scrap wood, and it just makes a great shaping block and a great sanding block, and they're super easy to make. I go through these and just throw them out in my scrap pile, but that helps me just clean up the saw marks from this cut. And these are easy to come by, and I did a whole boat, and I haven't even used this up, so it works really well. So the risers on the sides are all done. They've got the notches in them to pick up that lateral support bracing, which creates a shelf. And I've also got a groove cut in them, and that's going to accept the bolt that allows the top to slide up and down and adjust the height of the sawhorse. So these are all done. These are the sides. There's also a spreader, and you'll see how they kind of why that's spread out. But this thing is going to sit on the outside and has to have a matching groove in it to capture that bolt as well. So those are all done. These were thicker, and so they were taller than the router bit, so I sent them through one way, flipped it over, and then sent it through the other way, and that worked out pretty well. Those don't need to be hyper accurate, but it's got to have enough clearance for the bolts. So I can set those aside. Those are all ready to go now with some finishing work as I assemble them. And then I'll move on to the cutting the holes for the legs. And the legs are going to kind of fit in three different ways. They'll either sit in that drawer if this thing's going to hang up on the wall, and in which case the legs won't be attached to anything. They'll just be sitting in that drawer. If it's part of my island, then I'll tuck the legs in the long way here and create kind of feet out of it. So I'll drill a couple holes in this top, what is the base of the sawhorse. I'll cut a couple holes in there to secure the feet that way. And then when I'm using them strictly as sawhorses, they'll be wide, and I'll drill another set of holes in there for those. I'm going to use a different approach than I had on the old sawhorse. The old sawhorse had a bolt, and then it had a sort of a wing nut from an old Yakima ski rack that acted as the binder, and that allows you to secure the feet to the bottom, but also allows you to secure the sides so that it could raise up and down. And that was great, except for when I'd pull it apart, the bolt would fall out, and I'd have to chase down the bolt, and I'd have to kind of put it in. So I'm going to use this blind T-nut. This thing will fix into the side, in this case the feet on this one. That'll fix into the feet, and then I'll have a bolt going down from the top that'll secure them in, and I can tighten it up easily. These I found they're pretty inexpensive, and I found them on eBay. They were a lot cheaper than the wing nuts too. So I'll need to cut a pilot hole first, then I will cut with a Forstner bit. I'll give myself a little relief so this thing's not, so it's not sticking out. And then I'll cut on the leg side, I'll cut the bore to match that shaft, and on the other side I'll cut it to match this. So I got to drill a bunch of holes and get these all prepped. It's easier to drill these holes and get them all set up before I assemble everything, so I'll do that on the drill press, and then I can get on to assembly. So for the top portion of this thing, I need to cut out some MDF to make sort of a shell that's going to slide up and down on top of that base that's already been built. And if I learned anything from my first cuts with the track saw, it just needs to be on a completely flat surface. So that's where I'm headed with this island shop idea. But for now, I need to kind of improvise. So I've taken my welding table and I put my lid on it, and this is kind of the way I've made a makeshift island. It takes a while to set up every time, and that's the whole point, is to have it ready to go. But with it, I can clamp down the track so that it's really fixed. I decided rather than shooting nails in the sides of this, since you might hit them with something when you're using the sawhorse, I just glued it together, and I'm putting these little just pieces of poplar in here in the corners just to kind of reinforce it, glued in. I'll do it across the top in there as well. All right, well that wraps up the build of these sawhorses. These are going to work great. They are heavy, which is good because I want this to be a really stable platform to build a base around. I'm going to cut some holes in them and add some other grooves for jigging and other things. This is all going to fit together in a big island, and that island will allow me to keep a workshop set up. Right now, as you saw, I roll my workshop out and put it away every time, which is great, but it kind of is a disincentive for me to get working. So anyway, these are the first step. They were fun to build. Hopefully you enjoyed watching and learned something along the way or were inspired to work on your own workshop. Thanks for watching, and until I see you next, I'll be out building.